Hi there, Jim here. Today, we're going to go through the process of unboxing and setting up this digital microscope. This happens to be an Andonstar AD409 microscope setup, and I'm going to show how to get this working. This is part of me getting into the whole process of microsoldering so that I can deal with boards look like that or like that and try to do repairs at a smaller scale. So I also have a couple of items. We'll see if they're necessary. There's some extension tubes for the microscope. We'll look at that. There's a base here for holding the board in place while we're soldering. We'll try that out. And also we'll look at attaching this. This is a ring light that goes around the base of the lamp. And so I thought that might be helpful because the light only comes with angled side lights. So we'll look at how that helps. Now, I purchased this microscope with my own funds. And with that in mind, if you found this video to be helpful, please give it a thumbs up, or better yet, subscribe to my channel. Questions and comments are always welcome. I appreciate the feedback because it really helps me know where I can focus my efforts. Without further ado, let's kind of get into this box and into the setup and see where it takes us. So, opening the box. Now this 409 is the model with the 10-inch screen. I figured bigger is better. So first things first, here we have an instruction manual and about 23 pages of the manual. So about half the manual is in English. So that'll probably be important because these digital microscopes have a ton of features. Packaging is really nicely done here. So we have here a really large screen. That's impressive. And you can't really tell. Well, let's unpack that. So we can see here that the key part of the lens is already attached to the screen here. So that's the lens there for the microscope, and that's already in place. Looks like maybe we're going to end up flipping that around. Probably like that. Okay. We'll just lay that a little bit to the side as we get to some of the other pieces here. What else do we have in the box? There's a power supply. Very nondescript. It does claim to have a UL certification, which is something that I tend to look for. That's nice. And there's a remote control. So that'll be handy for controlling some of the features, maybe. There's a package of clips. I guess this is to hold things down, maybe on a board. Okay, there's a sort of an assembly here. I think this assembly is used to move the microscope up and down. And this probably attaches to the base, to the platform. There's a locking screw here in the back that holds it in place. And that might be why some people suggested getting some extenders. We'll see what happens there. So that's all of that. Then there's an HDMI cable here. So that looks like it's a regular HDMI, perhaps to a mini HDMI. There is, I'm guessing that this is a controller for the light, since it has a on, plus, minus there. So that's probably to control the lights. There's another cable here. That's USB-A to micro USB. And find out what that's for in a bit. And then at the bottom of the box, there's a stand and some lights. So let's get the box out of the way and look at what's next in the assembly process. The first step is going to be to attach this bracket to the base. So there's some screw holes in the bottom here, and they're going to come together like this. And they did include an Allen key to help make that a little easier. And so we want to make sure that these are reasonably snug so that the thing doesn't start flopping all over the place. But we don't want to get carried away either, because we could strip the metal. Okay, so that's pretty quick, pretty easy. Now, that's not quite aligned. These clips are intended for fastening things down like little slides. So since I'm going to be using this for soldering, I'm not going to be using these clips. So I'm just going to put those back in the bag. Now, this unit was a little bit askance. So I've loosened, there's a nut here, tightening ring. So I'm just zoom in there a little bit. So I've loosened that, and then I'm just going to set that straight, and I can tighten that down. So now that's well aligned. Now before I slot the microscope unit in, the plug here for the light power is at the back here. And so I'm going to take this plug and I'm going to connect that in to get that operating. Now I think that this kind of connects into the back here. Oops. So let's get this together. The first step is going to be to take the main unit and slide it down into the bracket here, like so. And so we have to loosen these thumb screws first, and we have to get them loosened so that this can slide all the way down here. And that's a snug fit. So you really have to get them loosened. And now let's, at the same time, let's elevate this unit a little. And just to keep this, so right now that will wobble a fair amount. And so we tighten down these two thumb screws. And that now keeps it in place and doesn't wobble too much. Now we want to wire it together. And so we've got this wire here. Let me zoom out a little. So we've got this wire here with the switch control. And so this plug goes into the back here for the lights. Okay, and then the larger of the jacks goes into the power plug. So we'll use this to power the unit. And The smaller plug here plugs in at the back. Like so. And so now that's all connected. Not very difficult. Okay, I've switched to another camera in order to be able to better see what's going on here. And everything is plugged in. So the power cord here controls the lights. Now it also controls the main unit. So here when I turn it on, you can see the lights coming on. And now the main unit says welcome, and it goes into video mode. Now to change modes, I've got to use the remote. So we'll just take that out of the packaging. And of course it needs some batteries, and it didn't come with the batteries. So a pair of AAA batteries will help me out immensely. All right, batteries are in the remote. Let's see what happens if we press the menu button. We see the menu. Now, of course, maybe we're seeing black because that's what's at the bottom there. So let's put a board down here. Oh, okay. So we can sort of see the board, but it's not in focus. So let's figure out how we focus this unit. So the wheel back here moves up and down. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we can see stuff on the board. We'll need some better illumination, so let's point these lights at the board. Oh, that's better. That's much better. Okay. And so we can see the board pretty well, but it's a very small field of view. That's a single resistor on the board, so let's see what happens. We can adjust this here. And so that's giving us a bigger field of view. But of course, it's out of focus. So now we need to take it up higher. And this is where it looks like those extension tubes, okay, there. So that's in focus. And we can see a fair amount of the board, or a reasonable amount. We can see a couple of components, but this lens does have the capability to zoom out farther. It's just that right at the moment, I'm at the top of this bracket. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pair of extension tubes that I also purchased when I got this, and I'm going to extend this unit a little here in order to raise it up so that we can hopefully get a somewhat larger field of view and make better use of the overall range. Because right now we're at the top of the range and we're not really going to want to, for this purpose, be focused in very narrowly. So I've got two tubes and these screw together like so. And now we're going to insert them into the column. Now let's take this extension and we'll fasten that in here. Get that nice and tight. It's good and snug. And then this piece up here. And it fits perfectly. And we want to just get this into a spot like so, and then use the locking screw to lock it into place so it doesn't just spin too freely. Okay, so that's snug there. So now we have that together, and it's much higher up off of from the base. Now let's put this back in, and we'll come back and have a look at what kind of a field of view we can get. Right now, I am at the top of the range of the stand. You can see that the image on the screen isn't very sharply focused, but if I adjust the zoom here, you can see now that I've got quite a decent field of view there. So I can see a fair amount of stuff on the screen, and if I get a ruler out, we can measure what the field of view is. In the horizontal, I'm seeing about 32 centimeters across, and if we arrange this vertically, I'm getting about, was that 15, about 18 centimeters down. So 30 by 18. And so that's quite a lot. That's a pretty decent field of view. And I can see a fair amount of the board, but with this view of the board, that's going to be a little bit difficult to solder with. It's going to be difficult to solder with such a large amount of the board visible, because those components are pretty small, and getting a soldering iron in is going to be a little bit tricky. And so typically, I would think that if I'm going to be soldering, I'm going to be lowering it in, and I'll have to make do with a somewhat smaller field of view for soldering. Something like that might be acceptable, or I can work it down even lower, and something like that might work as well. And so a lot of options in terms of what you can do, but it does need to have that extension added in order to be able to get a decent field of view. Now let's have a look at what a soldering iron tip might look like in there briefly. There we go. And so you can see that my soldering iron tip is huge compared to the size of the components and the size of the pads that I'm going to be working on. One of the features that's a little bit awkward with this unit is the control for the control. You can see here for the light and the intensity of the light, but it also controls the power for the entire unit here. So I can bump up and down the light intensity, which is handy, but if I press the power button here, turning off the lights also turns off the screen and the entire unit, which is a little bit of a drag and a poor design choice, if you ask me, because I can imagine that I'm going to be hitting that that switch by accident all the time. And so I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to set up a separate power connection to allow me to control the microscope separately from the lights, because I can't imagine operating this in this fashion all the time. An adjustment to the light turning off the unit by accident just is not going to be a lot of fun. Now, fortunately, the unit did come with a second cable that you can see here. And so that second cable will allow me to power the microscope without controlling the lights at the same time. So let's hook that up and have a look. So now the unit's powered with a separate cable. The lights are off. I can turn the lights on. I can control the lights, and that's good. I can turn the lights off, I can turn the lights on, and so that's nice because that means that I don't risk accidentally turning the unit off. And I will mention that the cable to do that did come with the unit. And so the only, so it's kind of a weird situation here that they would actually bother to put together a unit like that that controls the power for the microscope along with the power for the lights, I think. Now I'm going to switch to using the HDMI output from the microscope rather than going from one camera to the other camera. The one thing that I will mention is that when I start to switch to the HDMI output, that is the only output that is available. So you can't see the image both on the screen here and the image on a separate device. So if you wanted to use this to record for somebody else, you can't have the image on two screens at the same time, which is an unfortunate limitation of this unit. So now let's switch over to the HDMI output, and we'll have a better view of the things going on the screen, and we can run through the details of the other features on the unit. So this video now is coming through the HDMI port. And so the screen on the Andonstar itself is black, and I can use the remote to adjust some of the settings. So some of the things that we can do with the remote, we can adjust the brightness. So this is sort of digital brightness control. And so I'm pressing the exposure buttons on the remote. We can also do some digital zooming. We can zoom in. You can see the indicator there. And we can also, we can't zoom out. So all we can do is zoom in. Other functions that we can achieve with the remote without going into the menus, there are quite a few. We can adjust the sharpness, although I don't think that has much of an impact on the image that we're seeing. We can change the contrast, but that's a little risky. That's high contrast, medium contrast, low contrast, and that just cycles through. I think medium works best. We can do an inverse video. That may or may not be useful for some things, or go back to normal. Black and white and color. We can turn on some crosshair lines that may be useful for some purpose. And that's about all we can do with the remote. If we go into the menu, there are settings that are available here in the menu. There's a resolution display. And so this changes the resolution of the video recording when you record a video, which requires you to have an SD card installed in the unit. We can change the exposure, but we saw how we could do that with the up-down buttons with the remote without having to go into the menu. We can change whether or not a date stamp gets placed onto the image. And it's currently off. We can adjust the sharpness, but of course that could also be done with the remote. We can freeze the video. The freeze feature allows us to sort of freeze the frame. So when the freeze is off, you can see that as I move the board, the image updates. If I turn freeze on, now, even though I'm moving the board, the image doesn't update. So not necessarily so handy for soldering, but perhaps if you've got some other purpose in mind, freezing the image so you can examine it may have some benefits. Let's unfreeze that. Okay. We can adjust the contrast. Once again, that could also have been adjusted from the remote directly. The color settings. In order to go through these, you actually have to press OK. So that's black and white. That's sepia. And that's the reverse color image. And then back to normal. And so those are all the features available in video mode. Pressing the menu button a second time brings up the second set of configurations here. And so we can configure the Wi-Fi settings here. The Wi-Fi is not used to connect the camera to another Wi-Fi source, but it's used to turn on a Wi-Fi spot from the camera itself. And so other devices can connect to the microscope. We have grid lines, so we can control grid lines. We can have a cross, and you can see I can turn that on. And here, these are acting as I operate the remote. So we have grid line or cross line, line. We have a set of lines. And these kind of go through a few settings, the direction, location, color. So let's turn them. So these are different types of lines. We can change them. Line 1, go from vertical to horizontal. We can adjust the position of line 1 so you can see the blue line there moving up and down. And so there are 7 lines available to us. If we go up here, I think that's 7. Oh, 8. So there's 8 lines available that we can use to maybe frame a region of interest. And we have a few colors that we can use. And so if we make the line transparent, it's effectively invisible. So we can go through blue, red, black, orange, green, and you can see that top line changing color as I do this. Yellow, and transparent turns it off. And then back to blue. So let's turn these lines off. And then we can set the date and time. And that's good. Okay. And so if we go back in, you see the date and time is set there. We can choose a language. And so there's a variety of languages available here. We can change the screen frequency to 50 or 60 hertz. We'll just leave it at 50 where it was. This is to format the SD card. And this will restore all of the settings to factory default. That allows us to see the version of the software installed in the system. And so that's everything available within the menus of the system. That's the basic features and functionality of the microscope. It appears to be a very capable, very functional unit, very clear picture, and the built-in lighting is much better than I thought it would be. It seems to work quite well, aside from the odd power combo switch there that I mentioned earlier in the video. From what I can see here on the screen, given the quality of the image and the resolution and what we're able to get here, this should work very well for microsoldering. There will be a follow-on video where I actually use this microscope to perform microsoldering. I hope you found this video to be useful. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time.